Hi, I'm Meredith. I'm pastor of Westminster, creator of Gastro Church, and about a year ago, when we were all stuck at home with the pandemic, I did a couple of videos called Kitchen Counter Theology. Well, it's been a year and a lot has changed, but it kind of seemed like the right time to do another one. So today, on the topic of finding faith in the kitchen and at the table, we're going to be talking about everybody's grandmother's favorite, sauerkraut. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be making sauerkraut, but what I'm actually going to be doing is talking about this thing called fermented foods, because this is the way your grandparents and your great-grandparents and most of humans have made and preserved foods for a very, very long time, possibly the beginning of human history, and very few people now actually know about it because we don't eat fermented foods anymore. This is how everyone used to preserve foods. So they would take their vegetables, they would chop them up, you take the cabbage and make little slices, chop it up into shreds. They would salt it, and then they would leave it for a couple days, a week, a month more. And instead of going rotten, it transformed this amazingly tart, sour, wonderful thing called sauerkraut. And it wasn't just cabbage that they did this with. Fermentation is the technology behind wine, mead, yogurt, cheese. It's the technology behind sourdough bread. It's the technology behind most of what humans have eaten over human history. And, I don't think historically we know exactly when we discovered it. It's one of the earliest food technologies that humans knew about, because as early as we can find civilizations, they've had some kind of fermented beverage, fermented food. Now, the thing is, those early civilizations didn't actually know what they were doing, because the truth is there's something that seems a little bit magical about it, right? Food is supposed to spoil. Food does spoil. That's especially fresh food like this. Fresh fruits in general and vegetables will spoil. And somehow something magical happened when they salted it and when they left out. It didn't spoil. It stayed good. It became this different thing. The same thing, they left honey out. Something magical seemed to happen. It became mead. They left grapes out. Something magical seemed to happen. It became wine. They could culture milk and it became yogurt. They had no idea what was going on. And I don't really fault them for not knowing what was going on, because the truth of the matter is what was actually going on is really weird. They created all kinds of stories about it. There are legends about fairies coming and making the honey into mead. The truth of what is actually happening is way weirder than anything that our forefathers invented, because the truth of what is actually happening is that we are inviting tiny, tiny little organisms to make a new home in this food so that we can then eat it. So here's what's actually happening. The whole world is surrounded by billions and billions and billions and billions of tiny little microorganisms. And you know this because we've heard all over the last year, wash your hands because of the germs. We've become very aware of standing in close proximity and being aware of viruses being able to be transmitted in aerosols and all that kinds of things. And so we know that such a thing as germs exist. But what you might not know, because you weren't paying attention in science class, or maybe they didn't teach you in science class, is that it's not just germs. It's bacteria, many of which are beneficial, some of which just don't care about us at all. Everything is covered in bacteria. It's covered in microorganisms. It's in the air. It's on all the food. It's on every animal. It's outside. It's inside. It is inside your body. And those of you who are getting freaked out right now because you're germaphobes and you're thinking about you going to spray some Lysol inside of yourself to kill all those germs, these are not bad bugs. These are not bad organisms. The truth of the matter is that you are alive because those microorganisms are helping you live. It's called, the scientists call it the microbiome. You are filled with tiny, tiny little animals that keep you alive. There are other tiny animals that try to kill you, but these tiny animals, these tiny microorganisms, keep you alive. It's your gut fauna and your gut flora. And so what happens in fermentation is the salting helps invite the right kind of bacteria to make a home here. And if you salt this and leave it, then the right kind of bacteria come and they infest the food that has been fermented, and they make it their home, and then it becomes sauerkraut, and it just kind of stabilizes there for months. I've heard of people keeping sauerkraut for years. Same thing happens if you ferment. You can ferment berries, you can ferment honey, you can ferment grapes. All of this, you're creating a space in which you're inviting bacteria to come and to culture it, to change it, to make a home. And then they do the work of actually making the food. And so when you eat a live, like a sauerkraut, a fermented sauerkraut, you're actually ingesting some of that bacteria into your body. Germaphobes, don't freak out. That not only helps then the bacteria that are already living in your body, it helps feed them, it helps supplement the microbiota that are already living within your body, and it is overall healthy for you to do, which is why, our forefathers, our ancestors ate sauerkraut because they needed to keep the cabbage good. Now it's become a trendy fad to eat as a health food because now we know what's going on, and we know that it's good for us, and we know that it actually helps all of those crazy little microorganisms living inside of us. Now, I want to pause with you for a second because I want to think about what I just told you. Some of you knew that, some of you didn't. I want to think about what I just told you. We are surrounded, blanketed in this reality of tiny little microorganisms living all around us. We can't see them, we can't smell them, we can't touch them. But they're real. And we know they're real because we see the evidence in the food. When we put the salt and it changes into sauerkraut, we see the evidence when we put in the yeast and the dough rises. We see the evidence when we leave out milk and it cultures into yogurt. We know it's there, but we can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't tangibly put our hands on it. And yet I look around me and I know, I've got 2 cats, 2 toddlers, and a dozen chickens. I don't even want to know what kind of bacteria is around here, but I know that beyond the level of what I can see, there is a world of life around me. And just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not real, because the evidence of it being real is all around me if I just notice it. Now, that brings me to my point for today. Because there's this passage in Hebrews that I didn't get for the longest time. It's the passage in Hebrews where the writer talks about faith. And he says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, I understand what it is to not see something, and I understand what it is to hope for something. But I didn't understand the connection between faith and those other things. And then when I read the rest of the chapter, what he does is he goes and he lists the saints who have lived a life of faith. And he lists what has happened in them through their faith, what they've done in their lives because of their faith. And for the writer, those lives, the life of the faithful person is the evidence of the things that we can't see. Culminating, of course, in Jesus Christ. The life of the faithful one is the evidence of the grace and the glory and the love of God that might be at times invisible to us, but is no less real. The reason that got me thinking about this is that every now and then, I have to confess something to you, every now and then, especially recently, the way the news has been, I look around and I just think, this is crazy. Right? This idea that with all the chaos going on in the world, that there is a God, that this God is personified love. The idea that there was a cosmic sacrifice that will make right all that is wrong in the world and initiate the new creation. The idea that I am invited to be something more than I am and something bigger than I am. There are times, especially right now, especially after looking at the news, when all of that sounds absolutely crazy. And then Hebrews reminds me that just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true. Because crazy things are sometimes true. We are surrounded by billions of microorganisms that keep us alive and ferment our food and all of that. And even though we can't see it, we can't touch it, it is still true as evidenced by what we taste. And yes, we are upheld by the grace of an omnipotent, omniscient God who so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son so that the world would not be condemned. And whoever believe in him would not perish but have eternal life. And that is crazy, but just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true. And the evidence of the truth of that statement lies. Here comes the kicker. The evidence of the truth of that statement lies in the lives of those who have faith. And that is a conviction to me in the many, many ways my life falls short. But that is also a word for me to look around and notice not the things that are going wrong, because y'all, there is a lot going wrong. But to notice the quiet, faithful ones who are giving evidence to the glory and the grace of God with their lives every day. And you know what? They're there. And they're real, and they're true, and it's not make-believe. They're just not loud. That's why you don't see them on the headlines. That's why they don't make the news. But that is the evidence that what we believe might be crazy. But that doesn't mean it's not true. So what you do with this, once you start fermenting, you discover you can ferment everything and anything, and then you do, and then it's a lot of fun. I can give you some books if you want to go down that rabbit trail. What you do once you have your cabbage is you salt it. So you put copious amounts of salt on this cabbage, and then you can either knead it with your hands for about 20 minutes till the water comes out, or you can just leave it and the salt draws water up for you. And then what you're going to do, you can mix it all around. So what I do is I just put a towel over this, leave it for about an hour, come back and the water will be drawn out, and then I'll knead it a couple times with my hands until it gets nice and juicy. And then what you do is you're just going to stick it down in a big jar. This is what I use. You shove it down in the mason jar. You get the liquid above the level of the cabbage, and then if you look in there, you see all those bubbles? That is the evidence of the bacteria that are alive and well. The more bubbles, the more bacteria are in there, and that means this is not rotten. This has transformed into a dwelling place for the bacteria that we hoped would come, and this has now become sauerkraut, which is ready to eat. I put a fermentation jar on top of it, a fermentation lid on top of this, because there's a gasket, a cap that releases the air. If you don't have one of those, you can put this with a regular mason jar lid, and then you just open it every day or so to release the gas, because all that bacteria in there are releasing gas. That's how you know they're alive. But this is the end product, and you have this fantastic jar of sauerkraut, just like your great-grandmother did, sitting on your shelf, not only to be a delicious side dish to your whatever you're having for dinner tonight, but also to be a healthy probiotic for all of those little tiny creatures living within you, keeping you alive. Friends, blessings on your table, blessings on your kitchen, whether you are out and about or whether you are staying home. I pray that you find some peace and some faith in these days, knowing that God is still King, and knowing that all that he said is still true, and resting in the comfort that just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope to see your fermented things popping up in social media. I'll see you again next time.